freedom of speech,
fundamental rights,
freedom of conscience,
academic freedom,
freedom of press,
and the right to listen.
You're listening to So to Speak, the free speech podcast, brought to you by FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education.
All right, I have a confession to make. When I started at FIRE in 2012 as assistant to the president, I was assistant to Greg Lukianoff, who's been on the show before, who you're all familiar with. Back in 2012, I didn't know who Lenny Bruce was. Greg would mention him as being a pioneer in both comedy and free speech, and that meant very little to me. His name had never come up before. Greg often likes to talk about things for which I'm not familiar, like comic books. He says, he referenced comic book characters. I sort of nod my head and try to divert the conversation elsewhere. But it became pretty obvious to me before long that Lenny Bruce was someone who I needed to know about. He was someone who was important to the world of free speech that we at FIRE live in. So one day, I left the office in Philadelphia and went back home to my apartment in West Philly and opened up a web browser and typed in the name Lenny Bruce. And I was shocked at what I found.
I'll end up like a schmuck with a Dixie cup and a thread. That's all I've had.
He was indeed a legend. He was indeed a pioneer. I watched the movie Lenny, featuring Dustin Hoffman, award-winning movie.
He was a comic, a cynic, a satirist, a criminal, a genius. The New York Post called him a kind of prophet.
I'm just a comic.
Dustin Hoffman, Lenny.
I watched the documentary Swear to Tell the Truth, narrated by Robert De Niro.
Let me tell you the truth. The truth is what is. And what should be is a fantasy, a terrible, terrible lie that someone gave the people long ago.
And learned that Lenny created a brand of comedy that nobody else was doing when Lenny was performing in the 1950s and 60s. He was talking about himself. He had this personal quality. He would talk about taboo subjects while other comedians were doing bada boom and knock knock jokes. He would talk about organized religion.
All right, who's here? Christ and Moses. Are you putting me on now? Telling them they're here.
He would skewer revered politicians and call out America for its attitudes about race and homosexuality. The comedy that you hear today was pioneered by Lenny Bruce. George Carlin, Richard Pryor, more contemporary comedians like Amy Schumer and Louis C.K., their personal quality, they're using their lives to tell jokes, is something that Lenny did. And Lenny did this to help people put their guards down. People laugh, their guards go down, they consider other points of view. Jon Stewart was also a pioneer in this regard. Today is the 50th anniversary of Lenny Bruce's death, on August 3rd in 1966. And I am here in my apartment today because tonight FIRE is hosting a celebration of Lenny's life in Manhattan. We've been doing a lot with Lenny Bruce lately. You all recall the episode previous to this where we interviewed the daughters of George Carlin, Richard Pryor, and Lenny Bruce, the three top comedians according to Comedy Central's list of 100 top comedians. And I've been talking quite regularly about the movie that we're coming out with, Can We Take a Joke, which looks at what happened when comedy and censorship collide on and off campus using Lenny Bruce as a through line. And today I am joined by a star of the film, Ron Collins. Ron is a scholar at the University of Washington School of Law, where he specializes in First Amendment law and constitutional law. He also happens to be the co-author of the Trials of Lenny Bruce, which carefully documents Lenny's career and free speech struggles. Ron, thanks for coming to the show.
It's a delight to be here.
I appreciate you coming up to Manhattan to celebrate Lenny's life and to educate a new generation about Lenny Bruce, because I imagine a lot of people listening today are as unfamiliar with Lenny as I was back in 2012. So, Ron, you're standing on a corner of Manhattan in 1950s or 60s. Lenny Bruce is performing in a comedy club. His name is on the marquee. and someone comes up to you and asks you who that is, how would you respond?
Well, if it's late 1950s, early 1960s, I'd say this guy's like nobody else. You really have to hear him. It's like he's from some other planet, and yet he is quintessentially American. There's something uninhibited about this guy. I really can't put my finger on it, but he's like no other comedian I've ever seen. I mean, the mother-in-law jokes, the why did the chicken cross the road jokes. If that's your shtick, don't go to see Lenny Bruce. On the other hand, if you have a problem with hypocrisy, then you're really going to like Lenny Bruce. Now, mind you, even if you like him, he may knock you out of your chair sometime because the guy, maybe it's just the way he's wired, but I think he gets off on pricking us, offending us, and at his best moments, making us to rethink what we thought we knew.
I would like an honest equation from any, at least grammar school graduate. Is the word son of a bitch less obscene to you than motherfucker? Really? Is it the fact that a Catholic president called all businessmen son of a bitches in a Jewish comic relates motherfucker? If you're interested in the meaning of obscenity, I'm less obscene than the president. If the word motherfucker stimulates you sexually, you're in a lot of trouble.
Lenny's had an interesting childhood, to say the least. How did he grow up, and how might that have influenced the person that he become and his outlook on life and his comedy?
I'm a law professor. I'm not a psychologist. Although I imagine you could bring a room full of Freudians and they'd have a field day with Lenny Bruce and his, where he grew up, his Jewish background, his mother, the striptease dancer, Hot Honey Harlow, as she was known, that he married.
His mother did she own a burlesque house?
She did. She did. And that was the world that Lenny grew up in. He felt very comfortable in that world. Was the die cast then? Maybe. But although he liked to joke a lot about it, there was much more to Lenny Bruce than, as he put it, tits and ass.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, he'd always been a bit of a troublemaker. He was dishonorably discharged from the Navy.
He was. Lenny Bruce was one of those folks where, the line was drawn, and he delighted in crossing it. That's part of what made him both famous and infamous.
Mm-hmm. And so he was dishonorably discharged from the Navy, and for performing in drag, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's right. Right.
And then he decided,
Gay Lenny.
And then he decided to get into comedy. Do you have any idea why he decided to get into comedy? Or?
Well, because I think it just came naturally to him. I mean, young Lenny, his whole persona was wrapped up in comedy, in mocking traditional mores, in, if you will, toying with taboos.
My name is Adolf Eichmann. My defense, I was a soldier. I saw the end of a conscientious day's effort. I saw all the work that I did. I watched through the portholes. I saw every Jew burned and turned into soap. Do you people think yourselves better because you burned your enemies at long distances with missiles without ever seeing what you had done to them? Hiroshima, Auf Wiedersehen.
He felt very comfortable there. Now, it did take him a while. When he first appears, I think in 1948, on the Arthur, I can't think of the guy's last name. It starts with a G. Arthur Godfrey. television show, which was really kind of a Americana show. That early Lenny was a lot different than he would be 10 years later.
Yes. What kind of comedy does he do?
Oh, impersonations, mimicry.
Oh, wonderful. And what's his name?
Lenny Bruce.
Lenny Bruce. Let's bring him on. Thank you, Mrs. Bruce.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see that television is coming in so strong in vaudeville. The action I get the biggest kick out of are the impersonators. I love it when they come out and say, "All right, George, I want you to stay up the north side. You stay up the south side. You stay up the west side. You stay up the north side, and you stay up the east side. Glad there's no more sides." Or they go, "Please, get out of here. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. And besides that, I don't like you."
But I think the idea of being stand-up, kind of just, if you will, releasing your inhibitions, became very natural to him.
Mm-hmm. He got a start in strip clubs.
He did, and wild strip clubs they were. I mean, these weren't just clubs where there was tits and ass. I mean, there was a lot of crazy, wild, uninhibited, robust, and always wide open antics going on in some of these clubs. I mean, these would have made Dionysius blush what was going on. And it's not an exaggeration to say that in some of these clubs, I mean, they were so rowdy and raunchy. They were almost like bacchanalian revelries. I mean, I don't know that there's any club in the United States anymore like some of those clubs. And a lot of them were out in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, which back in the 50s was like, the Wild West. I mean, it really was, the outer boundaries, not only of Los Angeles, but also of civilized culture.
Yeah.
And he felt completely comfortable in those joints.
Yeah, well, I mean, given his upbringing with his mother who worked in burlesque houses. But when,
You like that little Freudian piece there, I see. So tell me, doctor.
Well, his whole life is just fascinating.
Yeah.
We talk about Lenny Bruce today as this stand-up philosopher. Brandeis magazine, Brandeis is putting out Lenny Bruce's archives later this year.
By the way, that article in Brandeis magazine, a shout out to Alex Wall, one of my former students. Wrote that piece.
It was an excellent article. It's a couple 1,000-word piece that goes through Lenny's entire life and really hones in.
So you see, Alex, I did plug you. Thank you, Nico.
Yeah, but he uses the word stand-up philosopher at the beginning.
Yeah, let me take issue with that. At his best, that is certainly true. And that's what separated him from a lot of the comedians of his time. Mort Saul actually had some of that, but there was no edge to Mort Saul. He was thoughtful, he was witty. Nobody remembers Mort Saul today. I think he's still alive, but he might as well be dead. I just say that as far as his comedy. I'm not in any way.
Yeah, we're not here talking about Mort Saul. We're talking about Lenny Bruce.
But there were times, and we can get to this later when we talk about the First Amendment. There were times when there really wasn't a whole lot of philosophy going on. That there really wasn't a lot of social commentary going on. It was just kind of raunch, if you will, funny raunch. So I don't want to.
Do you have some examples?
Well, I mean,
some.
Well, the thing is there were two Lenny Bruces. There were the Lenny Bruces that were on the records, or at least the records done during his lifetime. And then there was the Lenny Bruce of the comedy clubs. Mm-hmm. And the Lenny Bruce of the comedy clubs really wasn't kind of as polished and as sanitized as the Lenny Bruce in the clubs. I mean, some of those things he did in the San Fernando Valley, I mean, they were just so wild, so over the top. I think there was one time when he actually urinated in somebody on somebody in the front stage, the front row, who was complaining about him. So this is how crazy things got. Now, I don't want to suggest that pissing on patrons is protected under the First Amendment. For clearly it's not. But I think this is one of the things that happens with our heroes, with our icons. We want to hold them up as kind of, to borrow a phrase from Bob Dylan, as kind of flesh-colored Christs that glow in the dark. Mm-hmm. And as Dylan said, it's easy to see without looking too far that not much is really sacred. Lenny Bruce was a comedian like no other. He was a social critic like no other. He was a comic philosopher like no other. But he was also fucking raunchy like no other. And, the thing is and we'll get to this later when we talk about the First Amendment and what it protects and why it protects it. But I think you have to see him. I don't like to see the sanitized Lenny. You know what I mean? Yeah. Obviously, I like him when he's, bits like Religions Incorporated, when he's really going after the hypocrisy in religion, or Christ and Moses, or when he's attacking the law and the morality and immorality of the law in routines like blah, 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 blah.
Swear that he didn't. What he say? Your Honor, he said blah, blah, blah. The judge, he said blah, blah, blah. Then the guy really yanked it up. That's right. Yeah, I hadn't believe it. There was a guy up on the stage in front of women and a mixed audience saying blah, blah, blah. The judge, this I never heard, blah, blah, blah. Said blah, blah, blah. He said blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to lie to you. It's in the minutes. I'm not going to lie to you. All right. The DA. The guy said blah, blah, blah. Look at him. He's smug. He's not going to repent. Then I dug something. They sort of like saying blah, blah, blah. Because they said it a few extra times.
I love those pieces, and I think those really stand out. But if we're going to be fair and we're going to be honest, he wasn't always a philosopher.
Well, I've been reading a lot about Lenny Bruce lately as I try to educate myself as a member.
Yeah, there's a great book.
Yeah,
what's the name of that book?
The Trials of Lenny Bruce. Which you can find online.
Yeah,
the Fall and Rise of an American Icon.
Oh, I thank you, and my family thanks you.
But I've been reading a lot about him. People say there's like 3 Lenny Bruces. There's the early Lenny Bruce, who's a little bit safer, and then there was. People talk about how there was like an 18-month period where Lenny Bruce was at the top of his game, and before he started getting busted in comedy clubs for his act, and before he started sort of bombing on stage, or insofar as he spent most of his time talking about his persecutions.
Yeah, there were 3 Lenny Bruces. I mean, at least for the time being, we like to put things in categories, but that's fine. That's fine. I mean, there were 3 Lenny Bruces, but there were only 2 Lenny Bruces that were comedians. Mm-hmm. There was, the safe Lenny and the uninhibited Lenny. Mm-hmm. What came after the 3rd Lenny Bruce? And I wrote about this today when he appeared in February of 1966 at UCLA. Speaking just a few months before he died. And, by that time he was so obsessed with the law and his fate, the fate that had befallen him, that for all practical purposes, he was really no longer a comedian. Yeah. He ceased to be funny. He was pathetic. Yeah. And, if you think about that word and its Greek origins, it's not funny. It's tragic.
Well, let's talk about the origins of that tragedy. It's sort of sad. What happened to Lenny Bruce? Let's take another step back. How did Lenny Bruce become famous? Because I'm reading a lot of this stuff, and it sounds like he's starting in these strip houses where no one's, presumably no one no entertainment mogul is going to catch him. But he's on the Steve Allen show, and he's making $200,000 a year. How does he get to that point?
Yeah,
and he also, he was hardly educated, right?
No, that's right.
I mean, for a guy we talk about being a stand-up philosopher, or some do, I know. Ninth grade education?
Yeah, if that. Like Hugo Black, Justice Hugo Black, who self-taught. Not that Lenny Bruce was Hugo Black, but they did have a number of things in common. By the way, speaking of Hugo Black, there's a famous line from Hugo Black, and I just want to throw it out there, and we can come back to it, and then I promise to get back to your question. It comes in a dissent he wrote in 1961. This while Lenny Bruce was having his problems with the law. It's in a case called In Re Anastopolo. And at the end of the dissent, he said, "We must not be afraid to be free." And I was just, the first time I heard that in law school, I was blown away. Mm-hmm. And actually, I read it in a dissenting opinion. And I thought, wow, freedom is something that at some point we fear. Mm-hmm. And really what was more than anything the trigger in Lenny Bruce is he did not fear freedom. I think that is really essential to what he was and who he became and how his life. Now, fear is a good thing and a bad thing, right? Yeah. I mean, when you're faced with danger, when there are 3 cops in the back of the audience waiting for you to say cocksucker, and you say it, and everybody laughs, and they haul you off to jail.
As they did right at the Gate of Horn, right?
Gate of Horn, yes.
In Chicago.
Yes, boy, you're on top of this guy. I'm impressed. Funny to the audience, funny to read about it, but it meant that he was arrested. And so, kind of getting back to your question, so late 50s, early 60s, he's releasing records. It's kind of a new comedy. It's called sick comedy, because Lenny was saying things. I mean, he was talking about religion. He was talking about law. He was talking about morality. At Ann's 440 in San Francisco, believe it or not, he's talking about homosexuality, I mean, people... this was just not something that was part of the vernacular, not even in comic clubs, So this is how he kind of, and as he comes into his being, it's about the same time. Remember, he's a creature of the 50s, the beat culture, Jack Kerouac,
Allen Ginsberg.
Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, all of those guys. But he kind of catapults into the counterculture with the advent of Bob Dylan and the whole hippie movement. And also jazz. Jazz was very important.
Yeah, and people say the rhythm of his comedy sort of has a jazz feel to it.
Well, one of the reasons it had a jazz feel is there were jazz performers, musicians, accompanying him with his routines.
Yeah, what was that one to come? The preposition. I forget the name of that.
To is to come. You're catching me now. 13 years after I co-authored this book with David Skover. David, there's your name. I didn't forget you. So forgive me, but that particular routine. Along with others, he did with jazz accompaniments.
Two's preposition. Come is a verb. To is a preposition, come is a verb. To is a preposition, come is a verb. The verb intransitive. To come. I've heard these 2 words my whole adult life, and as a kid when I thought I was sleeping. To come. To come. It's been like a big drum solo. Did you come? Did you come good? 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 Wrecked with our teeth, I come better with you, sweetheart, than anyone in the whole goddamn world.
So there was something revolutionary, and this was the rage. This was the counter-revolution, and so a part of him fit very neatly into that, and very soon he'd be wearing Nehru jackets. He wouldn't be wearing a suit and tie anymore, and there were people like Steve Allen. It's incredible. Steve Allen, people may not know that name today, but this TV host who is also a public intellectual, and a public intellectual committed to free speech, even speech that he disagreed with. And so immediately there was a bond between these two.
We get a great deal of mail from our viewers commenting on our sketches, indicating their likes and dislikes, and whether you realize it or not, there is just about no joke or sketch, particularly of a satirical sort, that will not offend somebody, a cowboy or a drunk or somebody. I don't want to equate those two already. I can see the cards are coming in. I'll tell you how we are going to face the problem. We have decided that once a month, we will book a comedian who will offend everybody. Fair enough? All right, and then we'll get it all over with, you see? A man who will disturb a great many social groups watching right now. Because, I'm serious, his satirical comments refer to many things not ordinarily discussed on television, and it serves you right. Now, that way, the NBC mail department will know in advance, right, that the complaints are coming in, they hire 3 or 4 extra girls, they get the stamped answers ready, we're very sorry, we didn't mean, that sort of thing. And then the whole thing is handled with neatness and dispatch. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is a very shocking comedian, the most shocking comedian of our time, a young man who is skyrocketing to fame, Lenny Bruce. Here he is.
But you might be interested in how I became offensive.
And by 1960, he's making a couple $100,000 a year. He's becoming like the counterculture hero, and he really felt most at home in the clubs, And although the clubs weren't as wild as they were in those San Fernando Valley days, he really kind of, if you will, tilted back to that. And so he always felt the need to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
And when he did, that's when the police knocked on Lenny Bruce's door.
Yeah, and he wasn't the only member of that Beat generation. Allen Ginsberg's Howl. I mean, that was happening at the same time as
1957 in San Francisco. Now, a lot of people make the mistake, not that you did, but actually Allen Ginsberg wasn't prosecuted. The prosecution was for the sale of the book, and that was Lawrence Ferlinghetti and his clerk. It was funny because Allen Ginsberg wrote the poem, but Ferlinghetti and his clerk paid the dues, but they prevailed.
Yeah, they did. And Lenny ultimately, at some point, got the same lawyer as them, right?
Same lawyer and same judge in San Francisco. More about Al Bendick and Judge Clayton Horn in a moment.
Yeah. So what was the first time Lenny was brought up, whether it was obscenity charges or some other charges for the content of his act? And when did this all start? What's the year?
Just as a preface to this, I mean, you pointed out how you didn't know Lenny Bruce.
I didn't.
And if you had talked to me in 1985 or 1990, I really didn't know. Maybe I knew the name, but he's before my time, even though I was born in 1949. I mean, I never went to any Lenny Bruce shows. I don't think I could get in. So I did want to do a shout out to the person I think was responsible for sending David Skover and myself down the primrose path. And that's somebody we dedicated a book to, and we referred to her as the first lady of the First Amendment, or the First Lady of Liberty is how I think we tagged it. And that's Nadine Strawson, the former president of the ACLU. Years ago, she sent me a book by Martin Garbus, who was one of the attorneys for Lenny in New York. And there was a chapter in there on Lenny Bruce, and I read it, and I thought, wow, I'd never seen it. It was Lenny Bruce, comedy, and First Amendment. I was definitely interested in the First Amendment, and I read a book by Albert Goldman, long biography. It was like the definitive biography. Everything about Lenny Bruce was there, but there was something that was missing. The law, and if you're a lawyer and you're a law professor and your background is in First Amendment, as was David's, we thought, God, this is an incredible story that's never been told. And so when we wrote The Trials of Lenny Bruce, which came out in 2002, the perspective was a biography of Lenny Bruce told through the lens of the First Amendment in his obscenity trials. So let's go back and think about these obscenity trials. They start off, and just think of the places where they happen. San Francisco, Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. I mean, we're not talking the Midwest, we're not going to talk in the South, and we're talking in the 60s. And we're talking in clubs where the performances were often after midnight. Moreover, in all of the clubs that Lenny Bruce performed, to the best of my knowledge, no one ever complained to the police. No one who attended the shows. There was a complaint in New York once, but it was by I think a social critic. But the audience, people were offended, and they just get up and walk out.
Mm-hmm.
You vote with your feet. And his problems began in San Francisco, I think in 1961, at a place called the Jazz Workshop. And just to see things in perspective, they begin in 1961 on October 1st, and they end on November 4th, 1964. So that's the period of time, October 1st, 61, when he's first busted in San Francisco, to November 4th, 1964, when he's convicted in New York. Okay, these are all obscenity busts, word crimes. So San Francisco, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. 35 months, nonstop persecution and prosecution, and I tallied it just for your show, 1,062 days of nonstop persecution and prosecution of Lenny Bruce. That's remarkable. I mean, you try to think about how a man is going to continue to make a living. I mean, once you're busted at a club, then the next thing that happens is the club's told that if they let you perform again, they will be busted.
Yep.
Now, the club owner was not prosecuted, to the best of my knowledge, of the Troubadour in Los Angeles. By the way, the Troubadour is still there, so if you want to go there, you can. At least it was there 2 years ago when I was in Los Angeles.
But they were at the Cafe A Go-Go.
Yeah.
Gator Horn.
The Gator Horn, Alan Riback. There were some incredible performances at these clubs, including the Gator Horn in Chicago.
Neither of which exist anymore.
No. And Alan Riback was told that if he continued to let Lenny Bruce perform, they would shut him down. And they did. And, Alan Riback and the Gator Horn never opened again.
Some of these club owners are heroes in their own right.
Well, I want to get to that. Yeah. But my God, you're doing a great job. You should get a raise.
Hear that, Greg?
Yeah, okay. As he slips me a bill here. Then you go to Los Angeles. You had the Jazz Workshop in San Francisco. You had the Gator Horn in Chicago. You had the Troubadour in Los Angeles. There was also a place called the Trolley Ho that he was busted. And then the Cafe A Go-Go in New York.
In the village, Greenwich Village.
Yeah, in Greenwich Village. And to think that in 1964, a guy's going to be arrested for using colorful language in a club in Greenwich Village after midnight in New York where nobody complained. I mean, it's a mindfuck.
Yeah.
It's not like nobody ever said cocksucker or motherfucker or any of the 7 dirty words. I mean, obviously people were saying that in clubs. Albeit not a lot of them, but Lenny Bruce wasn't the first. It wasn't the words. The fact was Lenny was offending people. He was offending religions. He was offending politicos. He was offending mores. He traveled in taboo. That's what the words allowed the prosecutors, particularly in places like Chicago, to come after him.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Wasn't there one police officer in Chicago who was on the record having told Lenny Bruce that they were arresting him for making fun of the Pope, and he said, and I'm saying that as a Catholic.
Yeah, no, and it's true. I mean, and it's true. I mean,
you can't even fathom that today.
Yeah, if it wasn't so tragic, it would be comic. But when Lenny Bruce was busted, I mean, basically he was busted for blasphemy or variations.
But you didn't have any blasphemy laws.
No. Blasphemy laws had already been declared unconstitutional. And the guy that won that case that had blasphemy laws declared unconstitutional was Ephraim London, who would be one of Lenny Bruce's New York lawyers. So Lenny goes to trial in Chicago before an Irish Catholic judge, and there's only 2 Jews in the room, Lenny and his lawyer. And Lenny looks around and he gets a little freaked and he says to his lawyer, they look around. He looks around and he notices that everybody in the room except Lenny and his lawyer have something in common. they all had ashes on their forehead. It was Ash Wednesday. And Lenny turned to his lawyer and said, not a good sign for a Jew boy. And he's right. Yeah. They convicted him. So just a quick shout out to the owners. We were talking about these folks. There is Alan Riback in Chicago. In New York, we have Howard Solomon, and
who you've met before.
Yeah, who's passed away now. To their credit, I mean, these guys, it would have been much easier, much safer for them to say, Lenny, we're with you, but just tone it down, and if you can't, we're going to have to show you the door. I mean, losing your license is a big fucking deal. It's really big. And, for all of us to kind of, in our safe spots, applaud them and say, right on and right on. Yeah. The fact is that they were really paying the dues. And so I think sometimes people would forget are the club owners and the lawyers who came to their defense.
Yeah. The lawyers that came to... So Lenny was only convicted... Well, he was convicted... He won on appeal a couple times, right? He was only ultimately convicted and then sentenced in New York.
Right.
Yeah.
So
to 4 months, and this was in 65, 64.
So, by the way, quick plug to Al Bendick. In 1957, Al Bendick was a young lawyer for the ACLU, and when the Ferlinghetti case came up involving the prosecution of Howl, the poem, the ACLU lawyer that made the difference in that case was Al Bendick.
Yeah.
He was not the lead counsel, but he was the guy that did the points and authorities, and it really had. He would also be Lenny Bruce's lawyer in San Francisco when Lenny Bruce was charged. But there was a judge, and a big shout out to this guy. His name was Clayton Horn. He presided over the obscenity trial of Howell in 1957. And if you would have, at that time, if that case was coming before that judge, you would have said, there's no way, zip, that this guy will ever rule in our favor. The guy was a Sunday school teacher. He was a man of faith. I mean, he had sentenced women convicted of petty theft to see the Ten Commandments.
The movie.
Yeah.
At that time, yeah.
And Clayton Horn was his name. And not only did he rule in favor of the First Amendment claim. Now, mind you, he was a municipal judge. I mean, these guys do traffic, dog barking cases, like kind of nothing. And he did something that a judge in that situation, misdemeanor judge, never does. He wrote an opinion. It was unpublished because they didn't publish the opinions of those judges. Yeah. It was just an incredible statement of First Amendment principles. And so when Lenny's case comes before that same judge, in 1961, I think it was, and Al Bendick is now representing him. So now you think, my God, this is the perfect judge. And what does Lenny do? He demands, although Al Bendick suggested to the contrary, a jury trial. And the jury was prepared to convict Lenny, except for the jury instructions that Al Bendick wrote and that the judge, Clayton Horn, insisted be given. So Lenny Bruce's success in his San Francisco trial was due to Al Bendick and Clayton Horn. And two remarkable, we lost Al last year, remarkable. And he was also the lawyer for Fantasy Records that did Lenny Bruce's comedy records.
Oh,
yeah.
I did not know that.
So and a great ACLU.
Was he litigating on behalf of the ACLU?
Yes, he was.
Because
the first time he was.
Because I read Paul Krasner's.
Yeah.
Paul Krasner was the editor of Lenny Bruce's autobiography, How to Win Friends and Influence, How to Talk Dirty and Influence People. A great title for a book like that, also being re-released right now by his daughter Kitty Bruce, who we interviewed on the last podcast. But he says in this LA Times op-ed, remembering Lenny Bruce, he reflects upon a letter he received from Lenny 2 months before his death. Lenny wrote to me, he said, I'm still working on the bust of the government of New York State. He included in his letter a doodle of Christ nailed to a crucifix with a speech balloon asking, where the hell is the ACLU? What do you think Lenny was referring to there?
Well, so for the first time, Al Bendick represented when he did the Howell case, he was with the ACLU. When he represented Lenny, he was a private attorney.
Yeah.
Still doing ACLU work, but representing. And to the best of my knowledge,
where was the ACLU then?
Well, let me put it this way. Lenny didn't lack means to pay for attorneys, and usually they come in when somebody doesn't have the money. And all the lawyers that represented him, I'm sure that Paul Krasner loves taking a dig at the ACLU. More power to him. There are times when I have my differences with that great organization.
And to be clear, Fire is great fans of the ACLU. Well, we just interviewed R.E.A. Nair.
As am I. I'm a card-carrying ACLUer. But, the fact is that all of his attorneys, if they weren't doing pro bono work for the ACLU, were all ACLU sympathizers. Mm-hmm. So I think it's more of a matter of form over substance. Mm-hmm. Plus, none of his cases really went to appeal except the Illinois one. The Illinois one, he's found guilty. And then the case goes to the Illinois Supreme Court, and he's represented by three incredible University of Chicago graduates: Harry Calvin, the noted First Amendment scholar; Maurice Rosenfield, who had been Hugh Hefner's lawyer; and William Ming,
And Harry Calvin wrote the Calvin Report for the University of Chicago. His glowing statement on free speech that was... Jeffrey Stone sort of piggybacked on
absolutely
in 2015.
A very prominent scholar, along with his friend Maurice Rosenfield and another friend William Ming. These guys were... Ming was one of the co-authors of the brief in Brown versus Board. He'd worked with the NAACP. He was the first African-American professor at University of Chicago. These three guys, this is a powerhouse team, and they represent him in the Illinois Supreme Court, and they lose. And then not long thereafter, the Illinois Supreme Court did something bizarre. It asked for rebriefing in the case, and it reversed itself. It reversed itself and ruled in favor. The good news was that Lenny Bruce, his conviction had been reversed, but Calvin had hoped, and his colleagues, to take the case to the Supreme Court, to really use this case as the poster child for a new and invigorated First Amendment when it came to sexual expression. Mm-hmm. And so when the case went the way it did, that moment never happened.
Yeah. Lenny did a lot of comedy about his persecutions.
Mm-hmm.
He has that famous line, in the halls of justice, the only justice is in the halls. He had a lot of very good First Amendment philosophy, too. He says, take away the right to say fuck, and you take away the right to say fuck the government. And then he does this really good shtick, and it's not really a shtick. It's the truth, where he talks about how, he's going in there and he's being prosecuted for somebody else's act, because when the judge calls on the cops who busted him to, testify, they're re-performing Lenny's act, but they're not funny. They're not comedians.
And I figured out after 4 years why I got arrested so many times. See what happened. It's been a comedy of errors. Here's how it happened. I do my act at perhaps 11 o'clock at night. Little do I know that 11 a.m. the next morning, before the grand jury somewhere, is another guy doing my act who's introduced as Lenny Bruce in substance. Here he is, Lenny Bruce in substance. A peace officer who is trained to recognize clear and present dangers, not make believe, does the act. The grand jury watches him work and they go, that stinks. But I get busted. And the irony is that I have to go to court and defend his act.
The thing is he was absolutely...
and he spent a lot of time trying to convince judges to let him do his act for the juries.
It was enough for these judges to read this stuff on a piece of paper, let alone a tape be played in a courtroom, a public courtroom, because in a sense that would be turning the courtroom into a comedy club. At least that was the fear. And so, yeah, it is true. And, Lenny kind of became kind of a teach-yourself lawyer. He was far better as a comedian than he was a lawyer. The truth be known. By the way,
Kitty Bruce's daughter would talk about like how he'd carry around law books.
He was, and he tried his best. I mean, there's a phone conversation that I think is on our CD, The Trials of Lenny Bruce, where he's talking to Harry Calvin, and he's talking about the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the First Amendment, and as a law professor, I must say, it is a bit much. But this is not to say that he didn't have his moments and that he didn't realize things. By the way, I want to give a shout out too. In Los Angeles, there's a young lawyer, Burden Marks, who really represented Lenny Bruce quite ably against, among others, a young prosecutor named Johnny Cochran. Was one of Lenny Bruce's prosecutors.
No way, really?
Yeah. But I mean,
Johnny Cochran, of course, is the guy who was on O.J. Simpson's defense.
That's right. The Johnny Cochran. But I mean, the real, the ultimate, the nightmare prosecutor was Richard Q in New York. And with a vengeance, he went after Lenny Bruce. And I want to just say a couple things about Richard Q. He graduated from Harvard Law School. He's dead now. He graduated from Harvard Law School, and he was a public servant. I mean, he really was. I mean, he could have made a lot more money going into another practice.
Tried to become DA, right?
Yeah, he did, and more about that in a moment. But and in many ways, he was a good guy. He was right on consumer issues. I think he was right on women's issues, right on environmental issues. A prosecutor prosecutes crime, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't fault him for that. And the guy had a lot going for him, but there was just something in his DNA that didn't sit well with Lenny Bruce. And this was his tragic flaw. And, I remember talking to him. He didn't agree to give us interviews. He wanted us to sign this contract, giving him liberty to edit our book, and we weren't going to do that. But I remember saying to him, I said, Mr. Q, when it's all said and done, despite all of the wonderful things you've done, what people will remember most is Lenny Bruce. And he said, absolutely not. He says, Lenny Bruce is quickly becoming, a name of the past. And when Richard Q died in the first paragraph of the New York Times obit, the man who prosecuted Lenny Bruce, as well it should be. And, I don't say that with glee, because it's really a tragedy, because this man really was, in many respects, a committed public servant. And he did a lot of wonderful things, but this was his tragic flaw.
When he tried to become DA, wasn't there a number of luminaries in the New York City artistic community who took out a New York Times advertisement, right? So
yeah, and there was a bad boy who worked for the Village Voice, and he had went after Q with wild abandon with several pieces he wrote.
Who is that? It's not Nat Hentoff.
Let's see. Yeah, it was Nat Hentoff. Nat, there's your shout out. I mean, when it comes to talking about freedom and First Amendment freedom, they just don't make them like Nat Hentoff anymore. But Nat Hentoff really was the man that brought Q down or kept him from going up. Yeah. And all of a sudden, the Lenny Bruce story was back.
Yeah. And we have to remember, too, that Lenny's troubles weren't confined to the United States. Wasn't he also banned from the United Kingdom and Australia? Banned from a country.
Yeah, actually, they threw him out. They took him to the airport, put him on the plane, and
no way.
Sent him away. By the way, there are still
trying to do that with Donald Trump now, right?
There are still, I guess, from what Chuck Harder tells me, there are still performances in England and tapes that we have yet to hear they exist somewhere, but they've been lost to time. So there's
this is a challenge out there to all those ambitious researchers. Go find those tapes.
They are still out there. But once Lenny is convicted 2-1, he appears before a 3-judge court. And by the way, he was represented ably by Ephraim London and Martin Garbus. And then just before the end of his trial, he fires both of them. Certainly not because of their lack of talent. I mean, they did a good job, but he wanted to do it himself. And now catch this. So he fires his counsel just before the end of the trial, although they've done a wonderful job.
Yeah.
And he decides he's going to represent himself. Not a smart move. But his first motion is he approaches the bench, 3 judges, and he serves each of them. He's suing each of them for violating his First Amendment rights under federal law. I mean, this is crazy shit. I mean, this is like bizarre, but
trying to pierce their qualified immunity.
There's that didn't go anywhere, and he's convicted 2-1.
Yeah.
And sentenced to Rikers. He leaves the state. And recently I wrote about when he appeared at UCLA. He spoke in UCLA. It was his second to last performance. I said not long ago that it was his last, but he appeared with Billy Graham on a Fillmore West concert with the Mothers of Invention and others. But by February, it was clear that his demons had gotten the better of him. He was depressed. He was divorced. He was bankrupt. He couldn't perform at any clubs. He had the New York conviction. Things were about as bad as they can get. And when I went back and I listened, because Chuck Harder had sent me the video, the audio of his February 1966 performance at UCLA, at the lecture series. It wasn't funny. It was sad. And by that point, it was obvious that he was broken. And he would tell his girlfriend at the time, he said, I think I'm going to die this year. And Graham, after he had performed, I think in June, said that the performance was a disaster and that this was the demise of a great comedian. So, as I said, he died before he was dead. And if you just stop the story on August 3rd, 1966, that would have been the end of the Lenny Bruce story.
Yeah, but it's not. For those who don't know, he died of an overdose on the same day that
of morphine.
The same day they were foreclosing on his home.
Right.
But that Lenny Bruce, as you say in the Can We Take a Joke, the phoenix then rises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Death was his best publicity agent. Lenny dead was much more viable than Lenny alive. There were plays on Broadway's. The Essential Lenny Bruce book had been released. Records now being released.
Bob Dylan writes a song about it.
Called Lenny. Nico from the Velvet Underground does that. If anybody remembers those folks. Those folks, in case you don't know, were the folks that influenced a group called the Talking Heads. So that takes us up a couple of generations. Yeah. So you have the Broadway play, Lenny, then you have the movie by Dustin Hoffman, then you have the performance film, a documentary on Lenny Bruce, and all of a sudden, into the 70s, the name Lenny Bruce is a cash cow. By the way, for a variety of legal reasons, and it's tragic, very little of that ever went to Kitty's way.
Yeah.
Or the family's way. And there was a lot of theft and a lot of legal maneuvering, and it is a sad story.
Yeah. And she's doing great work right now to honor her father's legacy, re-releasing his autobiography, but also having the Lenny Bruce Memorial Foundation, which helps give scholarships to people who are trying to overcome drug abuse.
And working with the people at Brandeis University, where they have, I emphasize, some of Lenny Bruce's papers, because I'm delighted to say, and I hope I can say it, that our current plan, at least as of August 3rd, 2016, is the complete unedited trial transcripts, yes, from San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York in toto will appear on the First Amendment online library to be launched by FIRE. And I'm so excited that that's happening. And I'm so excited to be working with the folks at FIRE. And it'll all be available free. So if it doesn't happen, I just want you, but I have every reason to believe it will happen, and it is happening.
We're working diligently to put that website together.
And they'll have it all there for the first time, and it's very exciting. So Brandeis, eat your heart out.
Lenny, the phoenix rises, as you say. Who started that, or did it happen right after he died? I mean, was it Lenny's death? Bam.
Well, the subtitle of our book is "The Fall and Rise of an American Icon."
Again, the book is "The Trials of Lenny Bruce: The Fall and Rise of an American Icon"
by Ron Collins and David Skover.
If you buy the book, you also get an accompanying CD with a lot of Lenny's really good, acts, and it's narrated by Nat Hentoff, who we mentioned.
And if you get the 10th edition, the anniversary 10th anniversary issue, which is available in digital format, you also have audio links and what have you actually in the book.
Really?
Yeah, it's top 5 books did that.
Well, it's actually funny because it comes with a CD, but no one has CD players.
No,
anymore.
well,
my laptop
you
doesn't
can
have a CD player.
get the digital form from top 5 books. So anyway, it's strange. As I've said before, and David's made the point, something remarkable happened on August 4th, 1966. Henceforth, never again, nowhere, not in any of the 50 states, not in the District of Columbia, not in any of the territories as far as I know, was a comedian ever again prosecuted, persecuted for word crimes in a comedy club.
Yeah.
It's almost as if the Supreme Court had issued a ruling. I mean, that's how big it was. And
George Carlin was arrested at Summerfest in Milwaukee, but not prosecuted.
So you're right. So
they learned a lesson, and George Carlin says, "I learned a lesson." Who was arrested with Lenny Bruce at the Gate of Horn?
Yeah.
Lenny Bruce called him a schmuck.
Yeah, he was arrested not for a comedy routine, but for being a smart aleck. When they asked him for his ID, he said, "I don't believe in IDs," and that got him in the paddy wagon with Lenny.
Yeah, but George Carlin said as soon as he was arrested that he learned a lesson from Lenny, which is as soon as that sort of thing happens, hire a civil rights attorney.
Yeah,
but I think the police learned their lesson. And, or the prosecutors.
So none ever went to trial. That's what they meant. And this is rather significant. This is huge. We can kind of think of all sorts of reasons, but I like to think that there was a certain guilt. That there's something terribly wrong that had gone on. Lenny ceased being a man and became a myth. And America fell in love with that myth. Yeah. Today, Lenny, the Jewish comedian, is the patron saint, if I can use that, of all comedians. I mean, their freedom, whether or not they want to exercise it or not, is anchored in what Lenny Bruce did for those 35 months and 1,062 days when he was persecuted, prosecuted, and tried in courts.
Yeah. August 4th, I mean, it seems like instantly people recognized what he had meant to the culture. The New Yorker wrote that Lenny had a huge appetite for life in all its transiency, absurdity, and potentiality. His delight was in questioning those who had given up trying to find answers, but the questioning was never malicious. Lenny Bruce was a chronic optimist. I think those words are beautiful. And those people that came after him, I mean, you talked about how that one prosecutor said he wouldn't be remembered from...
Dick Q.
Yeah. But you, in a piece that you published for Concurring Opinions and also a cross-post on FIRE's website today, at the beginning of that piece, you quote a separate prosecutor who said, "We drove him into poverty and bankruptcy and then murdered him. We all knew what we were doing. We used the law to kill him." It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it just kind of shows us that law can be a shield, but it also can be a weapon. When you think about liberty, when you think about freedom, you have to think about the comedy club owners. You have to think about the lawyers. You have to think about the the judges. You have to think about journalists. Shout out to Nat Hintoff. You have to shout, pretty fucked up guy, but Phil Spector in his time, he picked up the tab on Lenny's funeral and was responsible for helping create the myth, and I say that in a descriptive way, not in a pejorative way, of Lenny Bruce. But, you know, as I wrote today in the piece I did for Fire, you know, as to why do we kill comedians? We kill comedians, don't we? I'd like to see our First Amendment heroes alive rather than dead.
Yeah.
And this kind of gets us back, Nico, to where we began, and that is with Lenny Bruce, and I think Harry Calvin got it. And I may be taking a liberty tour here, but I don't think so. But if I am, I'm sure one of my professorial colleagues will call me on it. But I think he understood that the whole idea of having a free-spirited Lenny Bruce meant more than idealized notions of the pursuit of truth, romantic notions of democratic governance, fantasized notions of self-realization. Of course those things are important, and of course those things are part of the First Amendment, but the First Amendment also is a commitment to risk. It's not a suicide pact, but it does mean that from time to time we're willing to roll the dice. Did Lenny Bruce and the likes of Lenny Bruce and the people who followed him, did they make our culture more coarse? Perhaps. Did they make us feel more insensitive to certain things? Perhaps, right? But if you're not willing to take a chance, if you're not willing to risk something, then there's no real freedom. There's no real liberty. And so I come to praise Lenny, but not Lenny as the flesh-colored Christ that glowed in the dark. I come to say, praise him as this, that he represents the American who's unafraid to exercise his liberty. And if he crosses the line in exercising that liberty and offends people, then the response, as Justice Brandeis said, is not to silence him, it's to counter him, right? And it's not to shut him down by the government, but it's to respond to him. And in our day, if there's speech that's offensive, if there's speech that smacks of sexism or racism or hostility to people based on their religious beliefs, we need to counter that with everything in our might. And you don't counter it by pushing it under the rug. And I think when you think about Lenny Bruce, it means that we as Americans are willing to take these risks from time to time. And to be honest with you, I think at the end of the day, we're the better for it. But as Oliver Wendell Holmes said in one of his opinions, law, like life, is an experiment. Sometimes experiments fail, but I much prefer taking this experiment than going with the one they have in North Korea. I feel much more comfortable with putting my stock on the Lenny Bruces of the world and the Christopher Hitchens of the world, who we were talking about earlier, than the kind of mindset that fosters lockstep allegiance to a belief or a creed or a political ideal.
Yeah, where the governments can jail your words, as Lenny Bruce described what prosecutors were trying to do to him.
All alone, I'll be rich, but so all alone.
And then he got a posthumous pardon, due in no small part to your efforts. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, most people thought that Lenny Bruce's conviction in New York in 1964 had been reversed because though Lenny died in 1966, the club owner, Howard Solomon, took an appeal. And his appeal went all the way to the High Court in New York, which is the Court of Appeals. And there, Howard Solomon prevailed, which meant, he was the club owner, which meant that if Lenny Bruce were alive, his conviction would have likewise been overturned. And so people had assumed mistakenly that Lenny Bruce's conviction had been overturned. But as David Skover and I realized, we're law professors, no, it hadn't been overturned. And we thought this was just, just a bad way to end things, So after our book, The Trials of Lenny Bruce, came out, I'd contacted Robert Corn Revere at Davis Wright Tremaine, a very noted First Amendment lawyer, and told him about this idea that I had along with David Skover about petitioning Governor George Pataki to posthumously pardon Lenny Bruce.
Yeah, New York governor at the time.
Yeah, and it says a lot about Corn Revere that he agreed to do this. I mean, first of all, who knows a fuck about posthumous pardons? I mean, even as law professors and seasoned, that's a really specialized area. There are probably like 3 people in the country that work in that area, and particularly at the state level. But he agreed to undertake it, and we also started a petition campaign, and Penn Jillette, who really played an instrumental, very key role in bringing on other comedians and prominent figures.
Penn Jillette, I just listened to a podcast he did about Lenny Bruce. I was a huge Lenny Bruce fan. Lends a note to the reissue of his autobiography, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which he said when he first read made him want to be Jewish, do drugs, and move to New York City.
all of those things sound, I'm the only non-Jew I know. But in any event, he went to work and did a lot of original research. And then we had a press conference here in New York, and we were wearing red buttons that said,
"Pardon Lenny Bruce."
And I'm holding one right now. I had it upside down. No wonder you couldn't read it. And I'm going to give you this as a little token of my appreciation. And so we had this press conference, and Associated Press picked it up. And, the thing is, this was me kind of, along with David Skover and others, being a free spirit, kind of howling at the wind, if you will. We didn't think, honestly, that it would happen. Obviously, Bob Corn Revere put a lot of work into it and did a very skillful job.
Bang-up job.
But when you petition a governor for a posthumous pardon, first of all, this is not the top of their list. And second of all, they don't even have to respond. They don't have to say yes, no, we'll think about it, we'll get back to you, or this is why we say yes, or this. They don't have to do anything. So, I think on December 23rd, Bob Corn Revere calls me and he says, in a moment, in 5 minutes, your phone is going to start ringing for a week and nonstop. And I said, what happened? He said, they pardoned Lenny Bruce. And I thought, wow. And a shout out to George Pataki for doing the right thing at the right time. And I'm going to be very excited in October to have the honor of interviewing the former governor as to why he posthumously pardoned Lenny Bruce. But he did make some incredible statements at the time about his commitment to free speech and how the record needed to be corrected in this case.
Yeah.
And by the way, in the long history of New York, going back to the 18th and maybe even 17th century, there has never been before, since, or thereafter, a posthumous pardon. This was the first and only.
It's an incredible part of the story.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on. So I want to thank you, Ron, for coming here and for celebrating Lenny's life and for doing all that you do to help my generation and other generations remember it.
All I can say is I'm on fire.
You had to. You couldn't resist. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you for having me.
That's Ron Collins. He is the author of The Trials of Lenny Bruce, The Fall and Rise of an American Icon. You can catch Ron in the fire-supported documentary Can We Take a Joke? The movie is now available on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon Instant Video, and it's also available in 228 million North American homes via satellite providers and cable providers, including Verizon, Comcast, and DirecTV. As I've mentioned before on the show, Lenny Bruce's story is the through line for the film, and it features comedy legends Gilbert Gottfried, Adam Carolla, Penn Jillette, Lisa Lampanelli, and many more, and also free speech luminaries like Fire's own Greg Lukianoff and the Brookings Institution's Jonathan Rauch. This podcast is hosted and produced by me, Nico Perino, and recorded and edited by Aaron Reese and Chris Maltby. To learn more about So to Speak, you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/freespeechtalk or like us on Facebook at facebook.com/So to Speak podcast. To learn more about Lenny Bruce, you can check out our past interview with Kitty Bruce, his daughter, as well as George Carlin and Richard Pryor's daughters, Kelly Carlin and Rain Pryor. You can also, of course, check out the reissue of Lenny Bruce's autobiography, How to Talk Dirty and Influence People. You can also email us feedback at sotospeak@thefire.org or call in a question for a future show at 215-315-0100. Again, that is 215-315-0100. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider rating us and posting a review at iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.